Choosing a career, it feels like one of the biggest, most personal decisions we ever make, right? But it turns out there's a whole science dedicated to figuring out how we do it. So let's unpack the psychology behind this huge choice.
You know, we all got asked this question as kids. Answering it as an adult, though, that's a whole different ballgame. It's a surprisingly complex puzzle, and for over 100 years, experts have been trying to map out all the hidden forces that guide us to an answer.
And this isn't a new thing, not at all. The formal effort to guide people toward careers kicked off way back in 1913. From there, we see these massive government projects pop up to categorize every job under the sun and even try to predict their futures, all to help people like you and me navigate the world of work.
Okay, so how do we actually end up on a certain career path? Is it just random chance, a calling from the heavens? Well, psychologists have a few big ideas. Let's dive into some of the major theories that give us a different lens for how we find our way. First up is John Krumboltz and his social learning theory. The main takeaway here is pretty radical. You aren't born wanting to be an engineer or a chef. Nope. The idea is that your career preferences are learned behaviors, shaped by your own unique experiences and what you see happening to the people around you. I mean, let that sink in. Interests are the result of learning. This means your interests aren't set in stone. According to this theory, they can be changed, they can be developed, all through new experiences. You could literally learn to be passionate about something you know nothing about today. And this is how that theory gets put into action. A career counselor who buys into this model would push you to get out there and have more learning experiences. You know, go visit a workplace, grab coffee with someone in a field you're curious about, or even just use your imagination to picture yourself doing the job. Now, here's a different angle, the decision-making theory from Tiedemann and O'Hara. They weren't so worried about how you learn your interests. They were way more focused on the specific, step-by-step process of making the actual decision.
For them, it really boils down to two key stages. First, there's anticipation. This is the daydreaming phase. You explore, you brainstorm, you imagine what it would be like. Then comes implementation, where you actually step into the real world, test those daydreams against reality, and, adjust your expectations. It's this constant cycle of imagination and reality check.
Then you've got Linda Gottfredson's theory of circumscription and compromise. And this one is, well, maybe a bit more pragmatic. It argues that from a really young age, we start drawing lines around what jobs are for us, ruling out entire fields based on things like gender stereotypes or what we think our social status should be. That's the circumscription part. We narrow our list of options way down, and then we compromise.
So when you can't get your absolute dream job, what do you think is the first thing to go? Gottfredson's research found something fascinating. We are way more likely to give up on the actual field we're interested in before we'll sacrifice a job's prestige or choose something that clashes with our identity. Okay, so we've got all these theories floating around. But how does a counselor actually use this stuff to help someone? That brings us to their toolkit, the actual data-driven tools they use to help people make sense of the job market.
Have you ever seen a code that looks something like this? For decades, the go-to tool was the Dictionary of Occupational Titles, or DOT, and it assigned a unique 9-digit code to every single job, kind of like the Dewey Decimal System for books in a library. This one right here, that's the code for a counselor. It might look totally random, but it's pure logic. The first 3 numbers slot the job into a big category, in this case, psychology. The middle 3 get really specific about the tasks involved. And the last 3, they just help alphabetize the job title. It was this absolutely massive system for classifying work. And I mean massive. At its peak, the DOT listed about 20,000 different job titles in a huge, heavy printed book. But in 1991, things changed. It was replaced by ONET, an online database. ONET is much more streamlined and, crucially, way easier to keep up to date, which you need in today's fast-moving job market. But if you want to peek into the future, the real gold standard is the Occupational Outlook Handbook, or OAH. It's published by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it's pretty much considered the #1 source for career info in the United States. Seriously, think of this thing as a crystal ball for your career. The OOH gives you the dirt on what training you'll need, what you can realistically expect to earn, and, this is the big one, the projected growth or decline of that job down the road. But, of course, theories and guidebooks can't possibly capture the full picture. The real-world job market is, well, it's often a lot messier.
For starters, you can just throw the whole idea of a single forever job out the window. The average person these days will hold between 10 to 15, that's right, 10 to 15 different jobs over their lifetime. That totally changes career planning from a one-and-done decision to a constant process of adapting.
And then there's the tough reality of underemployment. This is what happens when someone is working a job that doesn't really use their skills or their education. Think of the classic story of the person with a master's degree working for minimum wage. It happens a lot when the number of educated workers grows faster than the number of high-skilled jobs. We also can't talk about work without talking about gender. The term pink-collar jobs was created to describe roles that have been traditionally dominated by women. These service sector jobs, like being a secretary or a childcare worker, often have different pay and prestige than male-dominated blue-collar or white-collar jobs. And this isn't just some dusty historical concept. Just look at these numbers in the U.S. today. About 90% of all nurses are women. Meanwhile, only around 34% of physicians are women. That is a stark contrast, and it shows that this kind of gender segregation in the workforce is still very, very real. And finally, once we've picked a career and we're in it, that job doesn't just stay at the office from 9 to 5. Our work life has these profound, sometimes surprising, effects on our personal life. Psychologists say it happens in two main ways. First is the spillover effect, where your work life just kind of bleeds into your personal time. Think of a flower arranger who also loves to do flower arranging as a hobby. But then there's the compensatory effect. That's when you use your free time to make up for what you don't get at work, like a librarian who has to be quiet all day long, so they become the life of the party at night. So this brings us to a final question for you to think about. Look at your own career path. Is your job an extension of who you are, spilling over into your hobbies and free time? Or is it something you feel the need to compensate for, shaping your life in reaction to what your work lacks? The answer to that, well, it says a whole lot about the role work truly plays in your life.